religion does, basically, that's most harmful for you, aside from the fact that it does this, the actual damage of the child abuse we were just talking about, which, by the way, I think there are two theological things that cause the most harm. One is the hellfire terrorism, which I think is terrorism, and the other is original sin, to teach you that you're basically bad and wrong and incapable and incompetent and all that, and that everything you have to have and need has to come from outside of you. Okay. What a way to raise a human being, right? Those of you that have children, that's not how you raise children. So aside from that, the other thing that religion does is that it takes away from you the work of learning how to come to terms with the huge challenges of just being a human being. Like, how are you going to make peace with the fact that someday you're going to die? How are you going to decide, how are you going to figure out how to run your own life and be responsible about that and stop trying to avoid it and stop trying to give it away, which, you know, people do with drugs and alcohol, they do with codependent relationships, they do with all kinds of ways. People try to give that away, right? It's a real problem. And so that's why some of us, I mean, my general approach in psychology is existential humanistic, because I think that basically that's the crux of it, that's the core of it, is that if you can accept the job of, if you can accept the responsibility for your own life, then everything else follows. And then what you need is courage, basically. I mean, the core character trait that you need to develop, basically, I think, is courage. Because there are no answers. It's not like I'm going to say, okay, here is the solution to death. Here's the solution to meaning. Here's the solution to this, to that, to the other. We don't have answers like that. What we do have is courage and bravery to go forth and live our lives as best we can, in spite of the things we don't know, and in spite of the things that are uncomfortable, right? The fact that things are partial and not perfect. We don't have perfect relationships. See, if you think about it, religion offers you perfect everything, right? You get a perfect life after you die, right? You go to heaven, everything's perfect. And by the way, there's something really weirdly imperfect about that, which is that you lose your free will. You notice that? Also, you know, Garden of Eden, okay, there's, you know, all right, well, how come you give them this weird situation where they fucked up because you set it up for them to fuck up, and then now they're getting punished forever and everybody else is punished, you know? Well, then isn't heaven like that too? I mean, why aren't people free to eat from the tree later? But never mind. There's nothing that really.
Don't try to bring logic into it.
Huh?
I said don't try to bring logic into it. It
Okay.
doesn't work.
Okay, but anyway, so you get a perfect afterlife, and you get a perfect relationship, not with each other, of course, because we're never supposed to really worry about the fact that our relationships are not very good, or that people fail us, right? Every time you criticize any people or any church or anything like that, they always say, just look to Jesus. And
Right. Fallen people.
so none of his followers are ever allowed to be criticized, just the ideal. And then your relationship with God is supposed to have this perfection, and your personal relationship with Jesus is supposed to be perfect, right? And perfect will of God? You know, the perfection is just, and his perfect plan.
Perfect love, perfect justice,
Peace. Perfect love, cast out fear.
So what
perpetual anxiety. That's what it was. It was not perfect peace.
So, you know, in a way, it's kind of a downer to come off of that, all those perfect things, and now what have we got? You know, we've got life, as it is, and its messiness. The full catastrophe, as Zorba the Greek said. You know, we've got relationships with ordinary people that have frailties and screw up sometimes and aren't perfect. And jobs that aren't perfect, careers that aren't perfect, and bodies that aren't perfect, and then we die.
Great. But it's a great fantasy to think, you're going to die and it's all going to be wonderful, right? And the more you suffered for Jesus, the better your eternal reward's going to be.
Yeah.
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 More souls you save, the more stars you're going to have in your crown.
Right.
Except for those poor unfortunates who'd never hear, and have a pretty shitty life as it is on earth.
Yeah, and how do we figure that out, huh?
God will take care of them. Well, they're sinful from the beginning, so is
Right.
it really God's fault they're going to hell? I think not. I mean that's heretic. It's like, whose fault is it really? God will just take care of all that messy stuff. Be perfect.
And never mind what Jesus said in the book of Matthew, because we've got Romans, right? That just kind of gets us all out of these mandates to go feed them and clothe them and give them some health care, and
So sometimes it's kind of a surprise and actually kind of a shock to realize how much rebuilding and how much work there still is to do once you dump Christianity, because now you just have the job of being a human. I remember I was working with this guy who was recovering from Mormonism, and he was saying how much he missed having some people that he had all these things in common with, and that now he's just out in the world. He said, I don't have anything in common with anybody. And I just said, are you fucking kidding me? I said, next time you sit on the bus next to somebody on the bus, that person is trying to figure out how to deal with having their relationships work, how to cope with the fact they're going to die, how they're trying to find meaning in life, how what you have in common with the rest of us human beings is a lot. All these same things that we all share. I said, welcome to the human race. And we're also trying to live in peace and harmony in the world and get along with each other and even international relations and save the planet. I mean, geez, we have a lot in common. We have a lot of work to do, and we have a lot of shared concerns about our own health and survival and the whole thing. But that is the idea, isn't it? Like, oh, this tiny little group has all these things in common, and we share and we're all together, and then everybody else is just this scattered, lost bunch of people with nothing. And no, we're all we do have this shared humanity, but without perfect, neat, clean little answers. And religion makes you take this giant detour to where you haven't been facing all that stuff. And so you can, at a much later date, be facing things that maybe you would have been thinking about and dealing with more gradually and along the way. Like how do you create meaning in your life instead of now thinking, oh my God, I've got no meaning, or what do I do about the fact that I'm going to die? In a non-religious life, that's not something that's a big surprise. You might think about that all along. Animals die, there's a whole cycle of life. You walk in I remember when I first started to think about this, I'm walking through the forest and seeing a fallen log and how it was decaying, and there were all these mushrooms and green shoots coming up, and just the regeneration. And a friend of mine said, that's even like, It's just not that, it's transformation. All the same molecules are just reconfiguring and becoming different things, you know. And, you know, in a sense, I'm just as eternal as that palm tree. I'm gonna become something else. And if you think about death as the same way as, what was it like before you were born? Do you remember that? What was it like before you were born?
Peaceful.
You didn't exist.
Quiet.
Stupid than I am.
We were.
Unless you're theological or
At one
other
point,
tradition.
you were stardust, right? So,
Like Mark Twain said, I didn't mind being dead for millions of years before I was born. So.
yeah. So it doesn't necessarily have the terror. It doesn't necessarily have the terror that you were taught to associate with it. But if you're coming out of it from that background where you were told to be terrified of it, then you know you're kind of coming at it cold, and you have to do this whole developmental task of coming to terms with it and making peace with it, which is what the whole rest of humanity has been doing. So welcome to the game. You know, we're all doing this, and it's not new at all. It's just that you were sold a bill of goods that there was some simple answer like that was going to take away the problem.
And there's lots